So in coming to church, we should have a better sense of how to live our lives. And that's why I love this text from Matthew. As with many of the things that Jesus says, it is challenging, but it's also helpful. So this is from Matthew 18, verses 15 through 21. If another member of the church sins against you, go and point out the fault when the two of you are alone. If the member listens to you, you have regained that one. But if you're not listened to, take one or two others along with you, so that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If the member refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if the offender refuses to listen even to the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. That's not as bad as it looks. Truly, I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly, I tell you, if 2 of you agree on earth about anything you ask, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. That's a big promise. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them. And then Peter, good old Peter, came and said to Jesus, Lord, if another member of the church sins against me, how often should I forgive? As many as 7 times? But Jesus said to him, not 7 times, but I tell you 77 times. Here ends this reading of the gospel. May we hear in it, I'm going to come down. That's all right. May we hear in these words of the gospel, words that we need to hear today. Amen? So if you would now close your eyes so that we can pray for something in my words. Maybe it's not even in my words. Maybe it's just in being here in this space. There's breathing room in the pews. That whatever you need today, whatever this church needs today, God might grant. O God, may the words of my mouth and may the meditations of all of us, may they give you joy, O God, you who strengthen us day by day, and you who lead us day by day into new and abundant life. Amen. It's so quiet in here. Bring back the kids. I'm just kidding. No. Jackie says no. Well, we won't do that, don't worry. Well, a long time ago, a mentor of mine who hailed from New York or New Jersey, I think somewhere there, went to serve a congregation in the Midwest. She was looking for a change, which I can relate to. And things were going pretty well at first, except there was one issue that kept coming up time and time again with her new congregation. And eventually she complained about it on Facebook to her friends, because that's some rule of life, that if you have a complaint, put it on Facebook. But she really wanted to know. She asked her friends, well, what's going on here with this one issue? She said, no one here will really even tell me what they think. No one here will even tell me what they think. Now, her friends quickly assured her that this was completely normal in the Midwest. Completely normal, right? In the Midwest, it's considered impolite to be too direct. But she said to her friends, well, how will I know what they think? That's a real problem, right? How will I know what they think? And one of her Midwestern friends said, oh, you'll know. They'll just be passive-aggressive about it. Well, I wish I could say that that's not my experience in the Midwest, but I cannot say that because it has been my experience in the Midwest. I am from Iowa. I grew up amongst Lutheran folks. So right there is like 2 strikes. And therefore, I am well-schooled in the art of indirection. Well-schooled in the art of indirection. Where I'm from, it's called Iowa nice. Iowa. Have you heard of that before? Or Minnesota nice? You've heard of it? Okay, yes. You've heard of that. I just discovered, this is apropos of nothing, but I just discovered that Minnesotans hate Iowans. It's like this very deep-seated resentment. I don't know why. They said, well, you're too foolish to care. I was like, well, gosh. Anyway, never mind. So, good Lord. Anyway, Iowa nice, you could also call this how to say what you're saying without really saying it. How to say what you're saying without really saying it. Now, Iowa nice baffled that mentor of mine, especially when one church member actually broke protocol and finally told her what the issue was. But even then, she appreciated the honesty, like a good person from New York or New Jersey. But you don't have to be from Iowa or to be from the Midwest to function this way in our relationships. We often choose not to tell the truth to our friends, our partners, our siblings, or we choose often to passive-aggressively hint around the truth, hoping that by miracle, the people we love will be able to magically know what we're thinking, right? How many of us here, just by way of taking a poll, how many of us here are magically able to read other people's minds? You, okay, all right, we're going to test that later. We're going to test that later. Well, the sermon is not for you then. You're just fine. Okay, all right, perfect. Well, since most of the rest of us are not gifted with mind reading, we can take a different course. I think there's an invitation here to do that, to learn a few things, to put on our big kid pants. You'd be surprised how many adults need to put on their big kid pants and continue to grow into mature and loving human beings. And lucky us, we get to start at church. Everyone say, yay. Yay. Well, since there were no churches when Jesus was alive, we have to assume that Matthew was adapting one of Jesus' teachings to the community that he was living in, right? We can only imagine what was going on, but there are other indications in Matthew's gospel that his community was under a lot of pressure and a lot of strain. So is it any surprise that you get a teaching like this one, which is about communication in church, about conflict in church, about reconciliation and separation, and ultimately about forgiveness? If you're in conflict, do you need boosters in all of those areas? You do. Because are you in a tizzy when you're in conflict? Often you are, right? Is this timeless or what? Everyone say, it's timeless. Well, so since there's a lot of things here, I want to lift up a few aspects of this teaching which speak to me, which always seem relevant, no matter where I am. The first involves direct communication. We see it right away in this excerpt. If you want to, you can look at your bulletins at this text. Jesus said, if another member of the church sins against you, go and point out the fault when the two of you are alone. Can you feel every bone in my Iowa nice body trembling in fear? This is really hard, but it's really necessary. How many of us, when we're really hurt or mad or upset, go directly to the person or the entity or the institution that hurt us and say exactly that? I'm hurt, I'm mad, I'm upset. Is this a life skill? Yeah. And an absolutely necessary one for the church. Now, some of us have more practice in this than others. How many of you consider yourselves to be pretty good at direct communication? Okay, we've got some Connecticut nice going on. Perfect. This is just what I was looking for, right? Well, I remember when I was a kid, my mom would occasionally argue with one of two of the sisters that she had. And inevitably, there came a time during this, and it would last for sometimes days or weeks, right? And who knows what it was about, didn't matter. But inevitably, during this conflict, she would spend an hour on the phone talking to the sister that she wasn't mad at about the sister that she was mad at, right? Does that ring a bell to any of you, right? It is always easier to create a triangle, right? to like put the pieces together and to go around the conflict rather than to it, right? It's always easier because we don't want to be vulnerable, we don't want to be misheard or whatever we're scared of. And it's why pastors can sometimes be so annoying, because sometimes church folks will come to us and they'll say, talk about this conflict that they have, and we'll say something really obnoxious. Like, well, have you tried talking to that person? Right? Or would you like me to talk with you, with that person, right? And nobody wants to hear that. You should see the look on people's faces. They're just like, grr, I don't want to do that. I want you to change that person. Just change that person. But we can't do it. Amen? Can't do it. Of course, this approach applies to me. At my last church, someone was angry with me for years. And I knew it. But I didn't have the courage to broach the topic with her. And so where did that leave us? I ask you, where did that leave us? Well, she was ticked off. And I got a whole big helping, like a whole Jell-O mold of Iowa nice, passive aggressive. So what if talking one-on-one doesn't work, though? What then? Jesus lays out something of a plan that some churches have taken really seriously. They follow this almost to the letter, right? So if this person doesn't hear you, you can take other people with you to act as witnesses. There's this extraordinary process that he describes of conflict resolution. And you notice that it's not about punishment. It's not about revenge. It puts the priority on reconciliation, which again, we don't always like to hear. It's so much easier to walk away than it is to stay and have a hard conversation. Now, sometimes separation is necessary, but even then the people are treated with extraordinary grace. What does Jesus say? It's in your bulletin. It's in that text. Let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Everyone say boo, hiss. Except, didn't Jesus hang out with Gentiles? He did, right? Weren't tax collectors some of his friends? So even when we're on the other side of relationships, even when we're past the breakup, the conflict, the separation, the divorce, we're not meant to treat those folks as enemies. We're meant to treat them as we are, as sinners who are loved. As sinners who are loved. Now, do you see where I'm going with this? This is starting to get a little bit repetitive. Don't blame me. Do you see how this approach is vastly different from Iowa nice or Connecticut nice or whatever it is we learned, because people don't learn how to solve conflict in their families, for the most part. We just don't learn how to do that in our families. In fact, conflict is to family as Jell-O is to Iowa. I think sometimes, right? This approach is vastly different from Iowa nice. Nice is pleasant. Well, nice is nice. But nice is not love. And nice is not forgiveness. Amen? So finally, in response to all of this teaching, Peter asks an extremely practical question. I love Peter. He's always the guy who's sitting in the church and is like, well, let's go down to the nitty gritty. Forget this idealism. Let's just you give me numbers. You give me numbers, man. Okay. So Peter wants to know the exact number of times that he should forgive. I love this question. And I love that Peter thinks that he's setting a high bar with 7 times. I mean, that is kind of a lot of times to forgive, right? So Peter's like, I'm just going to put it up there 7 times. 7 times we should forgive. But what does Jesus say? No, he says 7 times is not enough. It's 77 times, or you've heard 7 times 7. In other words, we should forgive infinity times. That's really what he's saying. We are to forgive an infinity number of times. Forget about counting. Our whole lifestyle should be about forgiveness. Now, who's selling that? Who's selling that? Nobody else. Because nobody wants it. So where does that leave us? I mean, you dragged yourself to church on a morning when it still probably feels like an hour ago, right? It's a jury day. Where does this leave us? Well, it leaves us at our friend's cubicle at work. It leaves us on the phone with our family member. It leaves us in the church parking lot. It leaves us maybe sometimes when we're hurt or mad in this tender place. And it also leaves us with an opportunity to put on our big kid pants. Put on our big kid pants, one leg at a time. To figure out a way to speak with that person, to stand up for that issue, to tell as much truth as we can with as much love as we can. And what if it's not your issue? Because a lot of us are nice. And so we'll stand there when someone else is kvetching about someone else that we know. And we'll just stand there, right? And what do you do then, right? What if that's not our issue, our conflict, our truth? What do we do then? Well, I'm going to risk this thing I'm going to tell you because it's something that you might hear me say. But it's a phrase out of the Iowa Nice playbook. So gather around. If someone is wanting to make you a party of three, and you don't want to be a party of three, you don't need to take their side. You just need to be as compassionate as you can and say, this is the Iowa playbook piece. Huh, that's interesting. That's interesting. That's interesting is one of my best phrases. I don't know why they don't teach it in seminary. I do not know why. Because it's a way of acknowledging, ultimately people want to be just validated for what they're saying. But you don't have to take their perspective in order to validate the feelings they have. That's interesting. Or, I'm sorry you feel that way. And if they continue and you don't want to stand there hearing the vent, I also am pretty good at extricating myself too from situations like that. I have to use the restroom. Who can argue with that? I have to use the restroom. You can make an exit from your coworker. You can make an exit off the phone. And you can leave it at that. Because sometimes people don't want to fix their own problems. But you don't have to be there while they figure that out. So if you could say with me, that's interesting. All right. Well, isn't it true that every single one of us needs extra grace sometimes? Grace to see truth and grace when we're all in a tizzy, and we need forgiveness. And that is really, really nice when we get it. Amen? Amen.